It wasn't supposed to be the day that changed everything. But when Rebecca Morgan walked into that lecture hall, clutching a worn leather notebook filled with equations no one understood, not even she could have predicted how her algorithms would transform an industry overnight. The Cambridge rain fell in steady sheets against the windows of Turing Hall as the country's brightest mathematical minds gathered for what should have been a routine academic conference. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Rebecca stood at the back, her dark curls damp from the rain, her eyes fixed on the podium where Dr. William Bennett, Dean of Mathematics at Harvard, was concluding his keynote address. His voice carried across the hall with the practiced confidence of someone who had never been questioned. And so, my colleagues, as we evaluate new mathematical paradigms, we must discern between truly transformative equations and interesting but ultimately impractical academic exercises. His gaze swept the room, pausing momentarily on Rebecca in the back row. The slight narrowing of his eyes was subtle, but to Rebecca, it felt like a spotlight. She gripped her notebook tighter, the pages inside containing 3 years of work that Dean Bennett had dismissed as an elegant solution, looking for a non-existent problem. A mathematical curiosity, nothing more. The audience applauded politely as Bennett collected his notes. Academic jackets rustled, hushed conversations resumed. No one noticed Rebecca slipping through the crowd, making her way against the current. No one except Michael Chen, her former classmate, who caught her eye across the room and offered a small nod of encouragement. "Dr. Bennett," Rebecca called, her voice steadier than her hands. The dean turned, surprise briefly registering before. His features settled into polite impatience. "Ms. Morgan," he replied, emphasizing the Ms, in a way that reminded everyone within earshot that Rebecca had abandoned her PhD program in her 3rd year, a decision that had become departmental legend. "I wasn't aware you were still in academic circles." The room didn't go silent, but the conversations nearest them dimmed, ears tuning to the unexpected confrontation like radios finding a signal. "I've completed the Harrington framework," Rebecca said, opening her notebook to a page crowded with dense notations. "The variability problem you mentioned in your dismissal letter, I've solved it." Bennett's smile remained fixed, but something flickered in his eyes. "Ah, yes, your network optimization theory. Creative, certainly, but as I recall, it contained fatal flaws in practical application." "That was the previous iteration," Rebecca replied, her finger tracing down a series of equations. "This version accounts for the dynamic topology issues. It works, Dr. Bennett. It could revolutionize everything from telecommunications to supply chain management." A few heads turned their way now. Bennett glanced at the growing audience, then back at Rebecca. "Perhaps this isn't the appropriate venue for revisiting student projects, Ms. Morgan. My office has consultation hours on Thursdays." He gathered his briefcase, adding with practiced kindness, "It's good to see you still pursuing your interests." The dismissal was velvet-wrapped steel. Rebecca stood motionless as Bennett moved toward a cluster of colleagues, seamlessly joining their conversation as if the interruption had never occurred. Michael appeared at her side, his voice low. "He hasn't changed." "Neither have I," Rebecca replied, closing her notebook. "But my math has." What no one in that lecture hall realized, not the students capturing highlights for their research notes, not the professors mentally composing their rebuttals to Bennett's theories, not even Bennett himself, was that the true revolution wasn't happening on that stage. It was tucked into the notebook of a woman they'd all underestimated. The Boston skyline glittered beneath a clearing sky as Rebecca walked along the Charles River. The conference had ended hours ago, but Bennett's dismissal still echoed in her mind, joining a well-rehearsed chorus of similar rejections. 3 years ago it had been, "Your approach is mathematically intriguing, Ms. Morgan, but ultimately impractical." Last year at the MIT symposium, "Novel thinking but industry applications seem limited." And just 6 months earlier, in Bennett's office during an alumni event, "The pursuit of mathematical elegance at the expense of real-world utility is a young mathematician's indulgence." Each time the message was clear. Her work was clever, but useless. An academic curiosity, nothing more. Rebecca paused on the Weeks footbridge, watching the river flow beneath her. The spring evening was cool, but not cold, the aftermath of the day's rain, leaving everything with a fresh, washed gleam. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Michael's text was simple. "Rooftop at Emerson's in 30. Emerson's Cafe occupied the ground floor of a brick building in Cambridge that housed a mix of tech startups and academic offices. Its rooftop garden was seldom crowded, especially on weeknights. When Rebecca arrived, Michael was already there, 2 coffee cups steaming on the table before him. "I ordered your usual," he said, pushing a cup toward her. "Black, 1 sugar, enough caffeine to fuel a small generator." Rebecca managed a smile, dropping into the chair across from him. "Thanks." Michael Chen had been 2 years ahead of Rebecca in the graduate program. Now he divided his time between teaching computational theory and consulting for a tech firm in Boston. They'd bonded over being the only students who regularly pulled all-nighters in the computer lab, fueled by vending machine snacks and mathematical obsession. "So," Michael leaned forward, his expression serious. "Are you okay?" Rebecca stirred her coffee, watching the dark liquid swirl. "Bennett hasn't changed. Neither has academia," Michael replied, "still rewarding those who play the game and sidelining the ones who don't." "It's not about the game," Rebecca said, looking up. "My algorithms work, Michael. They're not just theoretically sound. They could solve real problems, major ones." Michael nodded slowly. "I believe you. Always have." "But no one else seems to," she sighed. 3 journals have rejected my papers. The industry conference in Chicago wouldn't even review my application to present, because your work doesn't fit neatly into their categories," Michael said. "It's cross-disciplinary. Too mathematical for the computer science crowd, too computational for the pure mathematicians, and too theoretical for the industry people. Until someone proves it isn't." Rebecca took a sip of coffee, its warmth steadying her. "I'm close, Michael. So close to demonstrating a practical application that even Bennett couldn't dismiss." Michael studied her for a moment. "You've got that look." "What look?" "The one you had before you scrapped your entire dissertation approach in year 2 and started over with something better. The one that means you're about to do something either brilliant or foolish. Often both." Rebecca laughed for the first time that day. "I'm done trying to convince academics. I need to prove it works in the real world. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." "And how exactly do you plan to do that without institutional backing or industry connections?" Rebecca's answer was interrupted by the arrival of a new figure at their table. Dr. Sarah Reynolds, formerly the youngest tenured professor in the Applied Mathematics Department and now Chief Research Officer at Axiom Technologies, stood before them in a charcoal blazer, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "I thought I recognized you two from across the room," she said, smiling. "Mind if I join you?" Dr. Reynolds had been Rebecca's favorite professor during her graduate studies. Unlike Bennett, who taught with imperial certainty, Reynolds had always approached mathematics as an ongoing conversation, brilliant but humble, confident without arrogance. "Please do," Michael replied, pulling out a chair for her. "I was at Bennett's talk today," Reynolds said as she sat down. "Saw your exchange, Rebecca." Rebecca felt her cheeks warm. "Not my finest moment. Actually, I was impressed by your restraint," Reynolds replied. "If someone had dismissed 3 years of my work, I might not have been so civil." "You saw that?" Rebecca asked. "Hard to miss," Reynolds said, signaling to a server for coffee. "More importantly, I saw the equations in your notebook when you opened it. Glimpsed them, rather. Network optimization with dynamic variables." Rebecca nodded, surprised. "With adaptive clustering algorithms that account for real-time changes in data flow." "Fascinating approach," Reynolds said, leaning forward slightly, "especially for telecommunications applications." "Exactly." Rebecca felt a surge of vindication, but that's just one application. The framework could be applied to any network facing resource allocation challenges under variable conditions. Reynolds studied her for a moment. "You know, Axiom is working on next-generation network solutions for autonomous systems." Michael's eyebrows rose. "The self-driving vehicle infrastructure project?" "Among others," Reynolds confirmed as her coffee arrived. "We've hit some significant bottlenecks in optimizing data flow across distributed networks. Vehicles making split-second decisions need seamless communication across massive, constantly changing networks." Rebecca's heart quickened. "That's precisely what my algorithms are designed to address, is it?" Reynolds took a sip of her coffee. "Well, that's quite a coincidence." But her tone suggested she didn't believe in coincidences, not in mathematics. "I've been following your work," Rebecca admitted. "Not stalking," Reynolds laughed. "I should hope not. But the problems Axiom is trying to solve are exactly the kind my research addresses. I've been using your company's public white papers as test cases for my framework." Reynolds set her cup down carefully. "Have you now? And what were your findings?" "With simulated data, my algorithms reduced network congestion by 64% while maintaining decision-critical data priority." Michael whistled quietly. Reynolds' expression remained neutral, but her eyes sharpened with interest. "That would be remarkable, if accurate," she said. "Our best solutions are achieving around 40% improvements, and they're requiring massive computing resources to do it." "My approach is more efficient," Rebecca said, unable to keep the passion from her voice. "It prioritizes elegant mathematics over brute force computing. It's why Bennett dismissed it. Too theoretical, not enough immediate commercial application. But with the right implementation." Rebecca's voice trailed off as she noticed the intensity of Reynolds' gaze. "I'm speaking at the Boston Innovation Summit tomorrow," Reynolds said after a moment. "There will be representatives from every major tech company in the Northeast, including Thomas Parker, Axiom's CEO. Rebecca nodded, not sure where this was heading. "I can't make you any promises," Reynolds continued, "but I could mention your work, perhaps even arrange an introduction." The offer hung in the air between them. Rebecca felt a flutter of hope, quickly tempered by years of disappointment. "Why would you do that?" she asked finally. Reynolds smiled. "Because I remember when you were in my advanced seminar. You turned in a solution to the Krantz differential problem that was unlike anything I'd seen. It wasn't just correct. It was elegant. And when I asked why you'd approached it from such an unusual angle, do you remember what you said?" Rebecca shook her head. "You said, because the conventional approach felt like using a sledgehammer to hang a picture, and that stuck with me." Reynolds finished her coffee. "The industry needs more elegant solutions and fewer sledgehammers. We're drowning in data, but starving for insight." Rebecca felt the weight of her notebook in her bag. 3 years of work, waiting for its moment. "I'd be grateful for the introduction," she said finally. Reynolds nodded. Come to my talk tomorrow. 10 a.m. main auditorium at the Innovation Center. Wear something professional. After Reynolds left, Rebecca and Michael sat in silence for a moment. Did that just happen? Rebecca asked finally. I think it did, Michael replied. Sarah Reynolds just offered you a potential path to the exact industry connections you need. It's just an introduction. It's a foot in the door, and that's all you've ever needed. Rebecca looked out over the Cambridge skyline, the lights of MIT and Harvard glowing in the distance. The institutions that had simultaneously nurtured and constrained her, taught her the rules of mathematics, and punished her for breaking them in search of new patterns. I need to prepare, she said, standing up. If I'm meeting the CEO of Axiom, I need to refine my presentation, simplify the equations for a non-technical audience, create some visualizations. Michael checked his watch. It's already 8:30. Then I'd better get started. The apartment Rebecca shared with Emily Torres, a law student at Harvard, was small but conveniently located halfway between Harvard and MIT. When Rebecca arrived home, Emily was at the kitchen table, surrounded by textbooks and empty coffee cups. You look like I feel, Emily said, glancing up from her constitutional law notes. Long day, Rebecca replied, heading straight for the coffee maker. About to be a longer night. Emily stretched, her back cracking audibly. Conference went. That well, huh? Bennett was Bennett, but I ran into Sarah Reynolds afterward. Wait, your old professor? The one who's now some big tech executive? Rebecca nodded, filling the coffee maker with fresh grounds. She wants to introduce me to the CEO of her company tomorrow. I need to prepare. Emily closed her textbook. Hold up, this is huge. Why don't you sound more excited? Rebecca leaned against the counter, waiting for the coffee to brew. Because I've been here before, Em. Getting my hopes up, thinking, this is it, someone finally sees the value in my work, only to have it fall through. But this is different, Emily insisted. This isn't some academic contest or journal submission. This is a real company with real problems to solve. And a very busy CEO who probably gives people 5 minutes of his time before moving on to the next meeting, Rebecca sighed. I need to make those 5 minutes count. Emily studied her roommate with the sharp eye of a future lawyer. You don't think you can do it? I know I can do the math, Rebecca replied, pouring her coffee. It's the selling part I'm worried about. I'm not good at packaging myself. Then let me help, Emily offered. I'm currently drowning in casework about persuasive arguments. I could use a break, and you could use a fresh perspective. Rebecca hesitated. Emily's offer was tempting, but her work was complex, filled with mathematical notation that looked like hieroglyphics to the uninitiated. I wouldn't even know where to start explaining it to you, she said. Start with the problem, Emily suggested, not the math. What real-world issue does your work solve? Rebecca considered this. It's about making networks smarter, more efficient. Right now, when data moves across networks, like internet traffic or cell phone signals, there's a lot of congestion and wasted resources. Like traffic jams on the information highway? Exactly. My algorithms create pathways that adapt in real time based on changing conditions. They're particularly useful for systems that need to make split-second decisions with perfect information, like autonomous vehicles. Emily nodded. That's already clearer than most of your explanations. Now, what's the big deal about your approach? Why is it better than what's already out there? As Rebecca explained, Emily took notes, occasionally interrupting to ask for clarification or simplification. By midnight, they had outlined a 5-minute presentation that conveyed the essence of Rebecca's work without drowning in technical details. This is actually really helpful, Rebecca admitted, reviewing Emily's notes. Don't sound so surprised, Emily grinned. Some skills translate across disciplines. Clear communication is universal. I just need to create some visuals now, Rebecca said, checking the time. A few diagrams that show how the networks operate before and after implementing my solution. I'm tapping out, Emily yawned. Some of us have class in the morning. Don't stay up all night. But that was precisely what Rebecca planned to do. After Emily went to bed, she set up her laptop at the kitchen table and began working on her presentation. Hours ticked by as she refined equations, created simulations, and assembled slides that would convey complex concepts simply. The apartment grew quiet, the sounds of Cambridge at night filtering through the partially open window, distant traffic, the occasional shout of late-night students, the soft rustle of spring leaves in the courtyard maple. Rebecca barely noticed, lost in the familiar trance of deep mathematical thought. It was during these late hours that her mind worked best, freed from interruptions and expectations. In daylight, she second-guessed herself, imagining Bennett's criticisms or recalling past rejections. But at night, there was only the pure, clean logic of mathematics, where truth existed independent of opinion. At 2:13 a.m., it happened. Rebecca had been running simulations of her algorithm against increasingly complex network scenarios. Each time, her solution outperformed conventional approaches by wide margins. But something about the results nagged at her. Not an error, but an unexpected pattern in the efficiency gains. She paused, staring at the graphs on her screen. The algorithm wasn't just rerouting data more efficiently, it was predicting congestion points before they occurred, like a traffic system that rerouted cars before the accident happened, not after. That can't be right, she muttered, rechecking her code. But it was. Somehow, through the complex interplay of her equations, the system was showing predictive properties she hadn't explicitly designed into it. The mathematics had evolved beyond her original intent, revealing deeper patterns. With trembling fingers, Rebecca modified her test parameters, applying the algorithm to a dataset she'd downloaded from Axiom's public research portal. Anonymized network traffic from their autonomous vehicle test grid in Michigan. According to their published papers, this was precisely the kind of optimization challenge that had been costing them millions in infrastructure overhead. She hit run, then walked to the window while the simulation processed. Cambridge was beautiful at night. The historic buildings and modern research facilities coexisting in architectural harmony. Somewhere across the river, Bennett was probably sleeping soundly, confident in his assessment of what constituted valuable mathematics. Her laptop chimed, indicating the simulation was complete. Rebecca returned to the table, expecting incremental improvements at best. What she saw instead took her breath away. Her algorithm hadn't just marginally improved the network's performance. It had completely transformed it, reducing data congestion by 89% while maintaining priority channels at full capacity. In a real-world implementation, this would mean autonomous vehicles communicating critical safety data without delays, while simultaneously allowing the network to handle vastly more devices. For companies like Axiom, this wasn't just an interesting mathematical curiosity, it was a potential solution to a problem that was costing them tens of millions in infrastructure overbuilding and limiting their market expansion. Rebecca sat back, stunned. She'd believed in her approach, defended it against criticism, persisted despite rejection. But even she hadn't realized its full potential until this moment. She verified the results 3 more times, tweaking parameters and testing edge cases. Each time the performance remained exceptional, far beyond current industry standards. This wasn't just an improvement, it was a breakthrough. Rebecca glanced at the clock, 3:47 a.m. Her meeting with Reynolds and potentially the Axiom CEO was just hours away. Instead of feeling exhausted, she felt electrified. The pieces had finally fallen into place. She worked furiously until dawn, refining her presentation to include these new findings. By the time Emily emerged from her bedroom, bleary-eyed and reaching for coffee, Rebecca was printing her final slides. "Did you sleep at all?" Emily asked, eyeing the scattered papers and empty coffee cups. Rebecca shook her head, a smile spreading across her face. "Something happened, Em. Something big." "Your math thing worked?" "Better than I ever imagined." Rebecca gathered her materials, organizing them into a portfolio. It doesn't just improve network efficiency. It predicts and prevents congestion before it happens. For autonomous vehicles, delivery drones, smart cities, this could change everything. Emily studied her roommate's face, the dark circles under her eyes, contrasting with the bright intensity of her gaze. "Well, you look terrible but sound convinced. Do you have time to shower before your big meeting?" Rebecca checked her phone, 7:23 a.m. "Barely. Can I borrow your blue blazer? The one with the subtle pattern? The make a good impression in Gort blazer?" "Absolutely. This sounds like exactly what it was made for." Rebecca's transformation from exhausted mathematician to polished professional was swift but effective. Shower, coffee, Emily's blazer over a simple white blouse, her one pair of professional slacks, and the minimal makeup skills she'd learned from YouTube tutorials for job interviews. Her curls remained somewhat rebellious, but she managed to tame them into what Emily called deliberate dishevelment. "How do I look?" she asked, turning in a circle before the hallway mirror. "Like someone who's about to change the world," Emily replied, handing her a travel mug of fresh coffee. "Now go sell the hell out of your algorithms." The Boston Innovation Center occupied a renovated industrial building in the Seaport district, its brick exterior contrasting with the ultra-modern glass and steel interior. When Rebecca arrived, the lobby was already filled with attendees networking over coffee and pastries. Name badges, business cards, polished shoes, and calculated laughter, the familiar rituals of professional gatherings. Rebecca collected her visitor badge and checked the time, 9:42 a.m. Reynolds would be speaking soon. As she made her way toward the main auditorium, a familiar voice stopped her cold. "Ms. Morgan, what a surprise." Rebecca turned to find Dean Bennett standing near the entrance, coffee in hand, looking as imperious in casual conference attire as he did behind his mahogany desk at Harvard. "Dr. Bennett," she replied, forcing a neutral tone, "I didn't expect to see you here." "I consult for several technology firms," he said with a thin smile. "They value practical, proven mathematical approaches. Are you presenting today?" The question carried a note of skepticism that turned it into a challenge. "Just attending," Rebecca replied, deciding against mentioning her meeting with Reynolds. "Keeping current with industry applications." Bennett nodded, his expression suggesting he found this reasonable, if ambitious. "Always good to understand where theoretical work fits or doesn't in commercial contexts. Dr. Reynolds is speaking soon, I believe. Her work on distributed computing is quite impressive. Practical applications, substantial industry impact." The emphasis on practical and substantial felt deliberate, a subtle reinforcement of his assessment of Rebecca's work. "I should find my seat," Rebecca said, gesturing toward the auditorium doors. "Good seeing you, Dr. Bennett." As she walked away, she heard him add, "Indeed. Best of luck with your continued explorations, Ms. Morgan." The auditorium was nearly full when Rebecca entered. She found a seat toward the middle, close enough to make eye contact with Reynolds, but not so close as to appear desperate. Her portfolio felt suddenly heavy in her hands, filled with equations that had seemed revolutionary at 3 a.m., but now faced the harsh scrutiny of daylight and industry experts. The doubts that had evaporated during her nighttime breakthrough began to creep back. What if she'd made computational errors? What if her test cases were too optimistic? What if Reynolds had simply been polite, with no real intention of facilitating a meaningful introduction? Rebecca was so lost in these thoughts that she almost missed Reynolds taking the stage, the applause bringing her back to the present moment. Dr. Sarah Reynolds commanded attention without demanding it. Her presentation style was confident but conversational, making complex technical concepts accessible without oversimplification. She discussed Axiom's work on network infrastructure for autonomous systems, the challenges they were facing, and the company's vision for smart cities where vehicles, drones, buildings, and utilities all communicated seamlessly. The bottleneck isn't hardware anymore, Reynolds explained, gesturing to a graph showing network congestion statistics. We have the sensors, the processors, the physical infrastructure. What we lack are the mathematical frameworks to optimize data flow across these increasingly complex networks. Rebecca sat up straighter. Reynolds was describing exactly the problem her algorithms addressed. At Axiom, we're exploring multiple approaches, Reynolds continued. Machine learning, edge computing, distributed processing. But what we really need is a mathematical breakthrough, an elegant solution that fundamentally changes how we think about network optimization. Reynolds paused, her gaze sweeping the audience before briefly settling on Rebecca. Sometimes innovation comes from unexpected places, she said. From people who approach problems differently because they haven't been constrained by industry conventions or academic orthodoxy. Was that a message to her? Rebecca couldn't be sure, but it felt significant. After the presentation concluded, attendees filed out for the coffee break before the next session. Rebecca remained seated, uncertain whether to approach Reynolds immediately or wait for her to make contact. Her question was answered when an assistant approached her room. "Ms. Morgan, Dr. Reynolds asked me to bring you to the speaker's lounge." Rebecca gathered her materials and followed the assistant through a side door and down a corridor, away from the crowd. The speaker's lounge was a comfortable room with sofas, refreshments, and notably, far fewer people than the main areas. Reynolds was engaged in conversation with a tall man in his 50s, his silver hair contrasting with the navy suit that screamed executive without saying a word. When Reynolds spotted Rebecca, she waved her over. "Rebecca, perfect timing. Thomas, this is Rebecca Morgan, the mathematician I mentioned. Rebecca, Thomas Parker, CEO of Axiom Technologies." Parker extended his hand, his grip firm but not aggressive. "Dr. Reynolds speaks highly of your work, Ms. Morgan. Something about a novel approach to network optimization?" Rebecca felt her mouth go dry. This was it, the moment she'd worked toward for years, condensed into what might be only minutes of a CEO's attention. "Yes, I've developed algorithms that address network congestion in dynamic environments," she began, hearing the slight tremor in her voice. "Particularly relevant for autonomous vehicle communications." Parker nodded politely, the expression of someone who had heard countless pitches and was reserving judgment. "What makes your approach different?" he asked. "We have dozens of PhDs working on these problems." Before Rebecca could answer, a new voice joined the conversation. "Indeed, mathematical approaches to network optimization are quite saturated, Mr. Parker. One wonders what novel contribution could possibly emerge outside established research frameworks." Dean Bennett had somehow materialized beside them, inserting himself into the conversation with the practiced ease of an academic politician. He nodded to Parker and Reynolds before turning a cool smile toward Rebecca. "Ms. Morgan was one of our doctoral candidates at Harvard, brilliant in many ways, but occasionally prone to unconventional approaches." The way he said unconventional made it sound like a polite substitute for misguided. Rebecca felt her chest tighten. Bennett's presence threatened to undermine Before she'd even had a chance to present her work, the familiar pattern was unfolding again, academic dismissal leading to missed opportunities. But something was different this time. The previous night's breakthrough had changed her. The equations in her portfolio weren't just theories, they were solutions, tested, verified solutions to problems costing companies like Axiom millions of dollars. Unconventional approaches are precisely what drive innovation, Dr. Bennett, Rebecca said, her voice finding its strength. And with respect, the network optimization space isn't saturated, it's stagnant. We're still using fundamental frameworks developed in the 1990s, just with more computing power behind them. Bennett's eyebrows rose slightly. Whether in surprise at her directness or disapproval, Rebecca couldn't tell. Parker, however, seemed more engaged, his attention shifting fully to Rebecca. "What would you propose instead?" he asked. Rebecca opened her portfolio and extracted 3 key visualizations, before, during, and after implementing her algorithm on the Axiom test data. This is what happens when we stop trying to fight network complexity and start embracing it, she explained, laying the diagrams on a nearby table. My algorithms don't just route data more efficiently, they predict congestion points before they occur, creating adaptive pathways that evolve with changing conditions. Parker leaned forward, studying the graphics with genuine interest. These results, are they simulated? Yes, but using real network data from Axiom's public research portal, Rebecca replied. I ran the simulations against your Michigan test grid dataset. Bennett cleared his throat. Simulations can be optimistic, Mr. Parker. Theoretical improvements often diminish substantially in real-world implementations. Not if the mathematics is sound, Reynolds interjected, joining them at the table. And from what I glimpsed yesterday, Rebecca's approach is mathematically elegant. No, I verified these results multiple times, Rebecca said, including just last night when I discovered something unexpected. The algorithm doesn't just optimize current data flow, it develops predictive properties over time. It learns the network patterns. Parker looked up sharply. Without machine learning components. Pure mathematics, Rebecca confirmed. The predictive behavior emerges from the algorithm's structure, not from training data. Bennett's expression had changed, the dismissiveness giving way to something more complex, doubt mixed with the first hints of reassessment. May I? He asked, gesturing to Rebecca's portfolio. She hesitated, then handed him her complete work, including the equations that had once been dismissed as useless. For several moments, the 4 of them stood in silence as Bennett flipped through the pages, his expression growing increasingly focused. When he looked up, the arrogance had been replaced by reluctant recognition. This is not what I expected, he admitted. The integration of dynamic variables with these boundary conditions, it's unorthodox but mathematically rigorous. Parker looked between Bennett and Rebecca. In plain English, Doctor? Bennett sighed. It appears Ms. Morgan has developed a truly novel approach. Whether it performs as indicated in real-world applications remains to be seen. But the mathematics is sound. Coming from Bennett, this was tantamount to enthusiastic praise. Parker turned to Rebecca. How close is this to implementation? Could we test it on our actual systems? This was the moment, the culmination of years of work, late nights, rejection, persistence. I can provide the complete algorithms today, Rebecca said. With your engineering team, we could implement a test version within weeks. Days, Bennett corrected, still studying the equations. With proper resources, this could be implemented in days. Rebecca blinked, surprised by the reversal. Bennett looked up, meeting her eyes directly. I may have been hasty in my previous assessment of your work, Ms. Morgan. It wasn't quite an apology, but from William Bennett, it was extraordinary. Parker checked his watch. I have to prepare for my keynote, but Dr. Reynolds has my full authorization to pursue this. If these results hold up in our systems... He left the sentence unfinished, but his meaning was clear. After Parker departed, Reynolds turned to Rebecca with a smile. I think that went rather well. Bennett closed the portfolio and handed it back to Rebecca. Ms. Morgan, I would be interested in discussing your work further. Perhaps you could consider returning to complete your doctorate, with this as your dissertation focus. The offer hung in the air between them. 3 years ago, it would have been everything Rebecca wanted. Now, it felt like a step backward. Thank you, Dr. Bennett, but my focus is on implementation now, not publication. Bennett nodded, accepting her decision with surprising grace. Then I wish you success. The department's resources remain available to you should you need them. After Bennett excused himself, Reynolds led Rebecca to a quiet corner of the lounge. Thomas doesn't make decisions lightly, she said, but he was genuinely impressed. We'd like to bring you in as a consultant initially to work directly with our engineering team on implementing your algorithms. Rebecca's mind raced. A consultant? I never thought... At a rate commensurate with the potential value, Reynolds continued, which, if your results are reproducible in our systems, would be substantial. Our conservative estimate is that this could save us $50 million annually in infrastructure costs alone, not counting the competitive advantage in market speed. 50 million. The number hit Rebecca like a physical force. Her algorithms, dismissed as useless mathematical curiosities, could save a company $50 million a year. When can we start? Rebecca asked. Reynolds smiled. How about tomorrow? As Rebecca left the Innovation Center an hour later, contract in hand, the spring sunlight felt different somehow. Brighter, more vivid. Cambridge awaited across the river, its academic spires and innovation labs coexisting in the same skyline. She paused on the bridge, watching boats navigate the Charles. Below, the water moved in currents and patterns, finding efficient paths around obstacles, nature's own optimization algorithm. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emily. Well? Rebecca smiled and typed back, You won't believe what just happened. 3 years of work, countless rejections, one dean who called her math useless, and at 2 a.m., a breakthrough that changed everything. The offices of Axiom Technologies occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming tower in downtown Boston, its glass walls offering panoramic views of the harbor. Rebecca Morgan stood in the elevator, watching the floor numbers climb, her reflection in the polished doors looking both familiar and strange. Gone was the exhausted graduate student in borrowed clothes. In her place stood a consultant with a freshly signed contract and a company badge clipped to her blazer. It had been 2 weeks since the Boston Innovation Summit. 2 weeks of paperwork, NDAs, and background checks before she could officially begin. 2 weeks during which Rebecca had alternated between exhilaration and terror, convinced that any moment someone would call to say there had been a mistake, but no such call had come. Instead, she'd received detailed emails from Dr. Reynolds about the implementation team, meeting schedules, and the dedicated workspace prepared for her on the 32nd floor. It was really happening. The elevator chimed as it reached the 32nd floor. Rebecca took a deep breath and stepped into a world of modern minimalism, open workspaces, glass-walled meeting rooms, and quiet concentration. A young man approached, his Axiom badge identifying him as Kevin Zhao, software engineering lead. Rebecca Morgan, he asked, extending his hand. Welcome to Axiom. The team's excited to meet you. Kevin led her through the office, pointing. out amenities, and introducing her to staff members whose names immediately blurred together in Rebecca's nervous mind. They reached a corner workspace with dual monitors, a standing desk, and a small meeting area. "This is your station," Kevin explained. "Dr. Reynolds wanted you to have space for collaboration, but also privacy when you need to focus." Rebecca set her bag down, noticing that someone had already placed a new laptop and welcome package on the desk. It felt surreal, professional, purposeful, nothing like the cramped graduate student offices or borrowed classroom spaces she was accustomed to. "The implementation team will be meeting in 15 minutes to get started," Kevin continued, gesturing to a glass-walled room visible from her desk. "There are 7 of us who'll be working directly with you to translate your algorithms into our systems." Rebecca nodded, trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. "I'm looking forward to it." Kevin hesitated, then added, "Just so you know, there's a lot of buzz about your work." The efficiency numbers Dr. Reynolds shared. If they're even half accurate in implementation, it would be transformative for our network architecture. "They'll hold," Rebecca said, more certainty in her voice now. "The mathematics is sound." Kevin smiled. "That's what we're hoping to prove. I'll let you settle in and come get you when the team's assembled." Alone at her workspace, Rebecca took a moment to absorb her surroundings. 2 years ago, she'd been working as a barista between failed academic job applications, explaining complex mathematics to uninterested customers while steaming milk. Now she was here, about to see her theories put into practice at one of the leading technology companies in the country. Her phone vibrated with a text from Emily. "First day. Remember, they hired you because they need your brain. You've got this." Rebecca smiled, typing back a quick thanks before opening her laptop. She had 15 minutes to prepare, to remind herself of all the details she'd refined over the past 2 weeks. 15 minutes to become the expert they were expecting. The implementation team meeting began precisely on schedule. Rebecca sat at a conference table surrounded by 7 Axiom engineers, 4 software developers, 2 network architects, and a systems integration specialist. Dr. Reynolds opened the session standing at the head of the table with the quiet authority that seemed to follow her everywhere. "As most of you know, we've brought in Rebecca Morgan to help implement a potentially groundbreaking approach to our network optimization challenges," Reynolds began. "I've shared the initial simulation results, but today Rebecca will walk us through the mathematical framework and implementation strategy." Reynolds nodded to Rebecca, then took a seat. All eyes turned to the newcomer. For a brief moment, Rebecca was transported back to her first graduate seminar presentation, the paralyzing feeling of being an imposter, about to be exposed. But this was different. These weren't academics looking to poke holes in theory. These were engineers seeking solutions to real problems. Rebecca stood and moved to the digital whiteboard. "Let me start with the fundamental problem we're trying to solve," she began, her voice steady. "Current network optimization approaches treat congestion as a reactive challenge. Identify bottlenecks, reroute traffic, repeat. But by the time you've identified the congestion, you've already lost critical milliseconds." She drew a simple network diagram, adding nodes and connections as she spoke. "My approach inverts this paradigm. Instead of reacting to congestion, we predict it before it occurs by treating the network as a dynamic mathematical space with constantly evolving properties." For the next hour, Rebecca outlined her algorithms, translating complex mathematics into implementation concepts the engineering team could visualize. Questions came rapid-fire, specific, technical, focused on practical application rather than theoretical foundations. Rebecca answered each one, occasionally referring to her notes, but mostly drawing from the deep mathematical understanding she'd built over years of work. As the session progressed, Rebecca felt a shift in the room. The initial polite skepticism gave way to engaged problem-solving, then to genuine excitement. These engineers weren't just humoring her. They were seeing the potential, already thinking about how to integrate her approach into their systems. The key challenge will be implementing this without disrupting existing networks, said Elaine Wu, one of the senior network architects. We can't just swap out the entire routing infrastructure overnight, Rebecca nodded. That's why I've designed the implementation to be modular. We can deploy it in stages, beginning with a shadow system that runs parallel to your existing architecture, proving the concept before gradually taking over routing decisions. Kevin, who had been taking detailed notes, looked up. How long would a shadow implementation take to show measurable results? With the right data inputs, we should see pattern recognition within 48 hours, Rebecca replied. Predictive capabilities would emerge more gradually, but I'd expect meaningful optimization improvements within 2 weeks. Dr. Reynolds, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. That's significantly faster than any of our previous optimization initiatives. If Rebecca's timeline holds, we could have preliminary results before the executive review next month. The meeting concluded with clear action items and a development schedule. As the team filed out, several engineers lingered to ask Rebecca additional questions or simply to welcome her aboard. The energy was palpable, a sense of being on the cusp of something important. Dr. Reynolds approached once the room had cleared. You did well, she said. They're convinced. Rebecca gathered her notes. They're cautiously optimistic. Convinced comes after implementation. Reynolds smiled. Fair enough. But you should know that Thomas Parker has taken a personal interest in this project. The potential cost savings and competitive advantage are significant enough that he's following our progress directly. Rebecca felt a flutter of nervousness. No pressure then. Just the opposite, Reynolds replied. It means you'll have whatever resources you need. This is priority one. Over the next 3 weeks, Rebecca's life fell into a new rhythm. Days at Axiom working with the implementation team, translating mathematical concepts into code, adjusting parameters, refining the framework. Evenings in her apartment, running personal simulations, testing edge cases, preparing for the next day's challenges. The shadow system launched on schedule, running parallel to Axiom's existing network infrastructure, but making no actual routing decisions, simply observing, learning, and generating optimization recommendations that could be compared against the current system's performance. Initial results were promising, but not revolutionary. The algorithm performed slightly better than existing systems in some scenarios, slightly worse in others. Rebecca wasn't discouraged. The mathematical framework needed time to adapt, to recognize patterns across millions of data points. It's learning, she explained to Kevin during their daily check-in. Each iteration refines the predictive model. Learning without machine learning, Kevin mused. The executive team is getting antsy for results. Parker was asking for progress reports yesterday. Rebecca nodded, understanding the pressure. Tell them to give it 3 more days. The mathematics predicts an exponential improvement curve, not linear. True to her prediction, on day 7, the shadow system showed its first significant performance jump. Rebecca was in her workspace, reviewing overnight data when she noticed the change. The algorithm had begun to predict congestion points with 67% accuracy, allowing for preemptive rerouting that improved overall network efficiency by 22%. Good, but not revolutionary. Not yet. Rebecca texted Michael, "It's working, but not breaking through. Need fresh eyes. Dinner tonight?" They met at a small Thai restaurant halfway between Axiom and MIT, where Michael was teaching a summer computational theory course. Over pad Thai and spring rolls, Rebecca outlined the implementation challenges, the progress, and the lingering gap between theoretical potential and practical results. "The math works," she insisted. "I've checked and rechecked, but something's holding it back in the real-world implementation." Michael considered this while refilling their teacups. "Your algorithm works with complete information, right? It needs to see the entire network to make optimal predictions." "Ideally, yes, but Axiom's network is too vast for any system to have complete visibility. We're using sampling techniques to approximate the whole." "What if that's the issue?" Michael suggested. "Not the algorithm itself, but the incompleteness of its inputs. You're giving it partial information and expecting complete insights." Rebecca paused, rice noodles halfway to her mouth. "But no system can process the entire network state in real time. It's computationally impossible with current hardware." "Is it?" Michael raised an eyebrow. "What if you're thinking about this the wrong way? Instead of sampling the entire network poorly, what if you divided it into overlapping zones that each get complete processing with boundaries that communicate state changes?" Rebecca set down her fork, mind racing. "Distributed processing, with locale-specific optimization and boundary negotiation." Michael grinned. "I have no idea what you just said, but you got that look again." "I need to get back to Axiom," Rebecca said, already reaching for her bag. "It's 9 o'clock at night." Rebecca paused. "Tomorrow then, first thing." She took a breath, then smiled. "Thanks, Michael. Sometimes I need someone to point out what I'm not seeing." "That's what friends are for," he replied, raising his teacup in a small toast. "Especially friends who've watched you stare at the same equation for 6 hours straight." Rebecca worked late into the night, sketching out a revised implementation approach that divided Axiom's network into overlapping responsibility zones, each with complete information processing within its domain and negotiated handoffs at boundaries. By morning, she had a complete proposal ready for the implementation team. The revised approach required significant architectural changes, but Kevin and the engineering team embraced the challenge. 3 days of intense coding, testing, and refinement followed, with Rebecca often working alongside the developers, translating mathematical concepts directly into implementation strategies. On a Tuesday morning in late June, Rebecca arrived at Axiom to find Kevin waiting at her workspace, practically vibrating with excitement. "It's happening," he said without preamble. "The breakthrough. Look." He pulled up a dashboard on her monitor, showing the shadow system's performance metrics. The lines on the graph had changed dramatically overnight. Network efficiency up 76%, congestion prediction accuracy at 91%, data prioritization maintaining critical channels at full capacity while optimizing secondary traffic. "When did this start?" Rebecca asked, leaning closer to examine the data. "Around 2 a.m., the system reached some kind of critical threshold in its pattern recognition. It's not just predicting congestion anymore, it's actively preventing it from occurring by optimizing routes before bottlenecks can form." Rebecca felt a surge of vindication. This was exactly what her mathematics had predicted. Not just incremental improvement, but transformative change once the system achieved sufficient understanding of network patterns. "I've already notified Dr. Reynolds," Kevin continued. "She's calling an emergency meeting at 10 to review the results with the executive team." The meeting was held in Axiom's main boardroom, a space Rebecca had seen only in passing during her building tour. Sleek and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering views across Boston, it radiated corporate power. Around the polished table sat Axiom's senior leadership, Dr. Reynolds, Thomas Parker, and 6 division heads, whose names and titles Rebecca struggled to keep straight as introductions were made. Kevin presented the technical data, his usual casual demeanor replaced. By professional precision, Rebecca followed with an explanation of the mathematical principles that had enabled the breakthrough, careful to balance technical accuracy with accessibility for the non-technical executives. Thomas Parker listened intently, occasionally asking pointed questions that revealed a deeper technical understanding than Rebecca had expected from a CEO. When the presentations concluded, he leaned forward, hands clasped on the table. "To be clear," he said, "this isn't just a performance improvement. This is a fundamental shift in how network optimization functions." "Yes," Rebecca confirmed, "rather than reacting to network conditions, the system is now anticipating and preventing congestion before it occurs. It's not just faster, it's smarter." Parker nodded, turning to his chief financial officer. "Sarah, what are the implications for our infrastructure spending?" The CFO consulted her tablet. "Based on these efficiency numbers, we could reduce our planned network hardware expansion by 62% while still supporting projected growth. That's roughly $53 million in capital expenditure savings this fiscal year alone." $53 million. The number hung in the air, giving tangible weight to Rebecca's algorithms, but Parker wasn't finished. "And the competitive advantage? Time to market impact?" This time, it was the chief product officer who responded. "Our autonomous systems rely on network responsiveness for safety certifications. This level of optimization could accelerate our certification process by months, potentially giving us first-mover advantage in 3 key markets." Parker absorbed this, then turned back to Rebecca. "Ms. Morgan, when can we move this from shadow implementation to production?" Rebecca glanced at Kevin, who nodded encouragingly. "With appropriate testing and safeguards, we could begin phased deployment next week. Full implementation within 30 days. "Make it 20, Parker said, a statement rather than a request. "And prepare a comprehensive briefing on this technology, patent applications, technical documentation, the works. I want this locked down before our competitors even know what we've accomplished." As the meeting adjourned, executives stopped to congratulate Rebecca, handshakes and business cards exchanged with newfound respect. Dr. Reynolds remained behind as the room cleared, her expression thoughtful. "You've done something remarkable here," she said once they were alone. "Not just technically, but politically. You've turned skeptics into advocates." Rebecca smiled. "The math did that. I just explained it." "Don't underestimate what you've accomplished," Reynolds replied. "Or what comes next. Thomas doesn't get excited about much, but he sees the potential here. This won't just change Axiom's networks. It could transform how data moves across every connected system in the world." The weight of this statement settled on Rebecca's shoulders, not a burden, but a responsibility she hadn't fully comprehended until now. Her work, once dismissed as useless mathematical curiosity, was about to reshape digital infrastructure at a fundamental level. "What does come next?" she asked. Reynolds smiled. "That, I think, is largely up to you." The implementation process moved with the urgency that only executive mandate and vast resources can create. Rebecca found herself at the center of a expanding team, now including patent attorneys, technical writers, and engineers from multiple Axiom divisions. Her workspace expanded to a small lab, and her consultant contract was hastily renegotiated to include intellectual property provisions and a compensation package that made her previous academic salary ambitions seem laughably modest. 20 days after the boardroom presentation, precisely as Parker had directed, the new network optimization system went live across Axiom's primary infrastructure. Rebecca spent the cutover night in the Network Operations Center, surrounded by engineers, monitoring dashboards for any sign of instability or performance degradation. None came. The transition was so smooth that several operators didn't realize it had happened until they saw the performance metrics improving in real time. "It's like watching traffic in a city suddenly start flowing perfectly," one operator commented, staring at his screen. "No jams, no accidents, everyone getting where they need to go without delay." Rebecca stood behind the observation glass, watching the team's reactions. After years of academic rejection and theoretical solitude, seeing her work not just implemented but celebrated by practical engineers was a vindication she could never have imagined. Her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "How's it going? World changed yet?" She smiled, typing back, "So far so good. No digital apocalypse yet." "Never doubted you," came his reply. "By the way, have you seen today's tech innovator?" Rebecca hadn't, but she found the article quickly enough online. The headline made her breath catch. "Axiom breakthrough. New algorithm could revolutionize digital networks." The article described Axiom's implementation of a revolutionary mathematical framework that was yielding unprecedented network efficiency improvements. While technical details were sparse, Axiom was clearly protecting its intellectual property. The article speculated about potential industry-wide implications if the technology lived up to early reports. Rebecca was mentioned by name, described as a brilliant young mathematician who had developed the core algorithms. There was no reference to her academic history or the rejection of her work by established institutions. In the industry press, results mattered more than credentials. 2 days after full implementation, Thomas Parker called a company-wide meeting. Standing on a stage in Axiom's largest auditorium, he announced record-breaking network performance metrics and revealed that the company was establishing a new division dedicated to the technology, the Adaptive Network Intelligence Group. Dr. Sarah Reynolds would lead the division, with Rebecca Morgan appointed as Chief Algorithm Architect. It wasn't a consultant position anymore. It was a career, a title, a future Rebecca hadn't dared to imagine when she walked into the Boston Innovation Summit just weeks earlier. As the applause died down, Parker added one more announcement. As part of our commitment to this technology, Axiom will be establishing a $3 million annual grant for mathematical research that challenges conventional approaches to real-world problems. The grant will be named the Morgan Innovation Fellowship in recognition of the breakthrough work that has transformed our company's future. The audience erupted again. Rebecca sat frozen in her seat, overwhelmed by the public recognition. Dr. Reynolds, seated beside her, leaned over with a smile. "Get used to it," she said. "This is just the beginning." The industry response to Axiom's breakthrough was immediate and intense. Technology publications ran features on the new approach to network optimization. Competitor companies scrambled to understand and potentially replicate the innovation. Investors drove Axiom's stock price up 17% in a single week. Through it all, Rebecca maintained her focus on the mathematics, working with her growing team to refine the algorithms, identify new applications, and push the boundaries of what was possible. The corporate world, with its politics and public relations, was still foreign territory, but the technical challenges, those she understood. 6 weeks after implementation, Rebecca was working late in her new office, no longer a workspace, but a proper room with a door and her name on it, when her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. Rebecca Morgan. She answered, attention still half on the equation she'd been refining. "Ms. Morgan, William Bennett here." Rebecca's focus snapped fully to the call. Dean Bennett, the man who had dismissed her work as useless, was calling her directly. "Dr. Bennett," she replied, keeping her tone neutral. "This is unexpected." Indeed. There was an awkward pause before he continued. I've been following the news about your work at Axiom. The implementation appears to be quite successful. It is, Rebecca confirmed. The algorithms are performing beyond even my initial projections. Another pause. I owe you an apology, Ms. Morgan. My assessment of your work was short-sighted. I failed to see the practical applications of what appeared to be purely theoretical innovation. Rebecca sat back in her chair, absorbing this unexpected admission. Bennett had built his career on being right, on identifying mathematical promise and steering it toward productive outcomes. Admitting a mistake of this magnitude must have cost him dearly. Thank you for saying that, she said finally. It means a lot. I've also called to extend an invitation, Bennett continued, his voice taking on a more formal tone. Harvard's Applied Mathematics Department is hosting a symposium next month on emerging mathematical frameworks with industry applications. We would be honored if you would deliver the keynote address. The irony wasn't lost on Rebecca. The same institution that had rejected her work now wanted to showcase it and her as an example of innovation. Would this be a Harvard event or an Axiom recruiting opportunity? She asked, unable to keep a slight edge from her voice. A fair question, Bennett admitted. The timing is convenient for the university, but the recognition is genuine. Ms. Morgan, your work deserves to be highlighted, especially to students who might otherwise abandon promising research when faced with institutional skepticism. Rebecca considered this. There was a certain poetic justice in returning to Harvard, not as a failed graduate student, but as an industry pioneer. More importantly, perhaps her story could encourage other students whose unconventional approaches were facing similar dismissal. I'll consider it, she said. Send me the details, and I'll discuss it with my team at Axiom. Of course, Bennett replied. And Rebecca, congratulations, truly. After the call ended, Rebecca sat quietly in her office, the equation on her screen momentarily forgotten. Outside her window, the Boston skyline glittered in the evening darkness, a landscape of established institutions and startup innovators, coexisting in uneasy balance. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emily. Dinner tonight. Got some big news to share. Rebecca smiled, grateful for the grounding presence of her roommate and friend who had supported her through the darkest moments of academic rejection. Absolutely. Meet you at home in an hour. She gathered her things, shut down her computer, and headed for the elevator. As she descended from Axiom's upper floors, Rebecca reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from dismissed academic to industry pioneer in a matter of months. The mathematics hadn't changed. The equations that Dr. Bennett had once called useless were the same ones now saving Axiom tens of millions of dollars and reshaping how digital networks functioned. What had changed was context, opportunity, and the courage to persist despite institutional rejection. Outside the Axiom building, Rebecca paused to look up at the tower of glass and steel that had become her professional home. Inside those walls, her algorithms were quietly optimizing data flows, anticipating congestion, ensuring that autonomous vehicles communicated without delays, that smart city sensors transmitted critical information seamlessly, that the digital world moved with unprecedented efficiency. All because she had refused to believe that elegant mathematics couldn't solve real-world problems. All because at 2 a.m., when most people would have given up, she had found the pattern that everyone else had missed. Rebecca turned away from the building and headed toward the subway station, a small smile playing at her lips. The journey wasn't over, it was just beginning. And this time, she wasn't walking it alone. The Harvard Mathematics Symposium attracted an overflow crowd, filling the historic Sanders Theater with a mix of academics, industry professionals, and students eager to witness the return of Rebecca Morgan. 3 months had passed since Axiom's implementation of her algorithms, and in that time, her work had become something of a legend in both academic and corporate circles, a mathematical framework that bridged theoretical elegance with unprecedented practical impact. Rebecca stood in the wings, watching Dean Bennett deliver the introduction. From her vantage point, she could see the audience filling every seat, with additional attendees standing at the back. The same lecture hall, where she had once stumbled through graduate presentations, now waited for her triumphant return. "It is my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker," Bennett was saying, his customary authoritative tone softened by what sounded almost like humility. A mathematician whose work challenges us to reconsider the boundaries between theoretical innovation and practical application. Her algorithms for network optimization have revolutionized how we think about dynamic systems and created what industry analysts are now calling the Morgan framework. Rebecca took a deep breath, straightening the lapel of her tailored blazer, no longer borrowed, but custom-made, part of her new professional wardrobe. In her hand was a small stone, smooth and cool, that she'd picked up from the banks of the Charles River on the morning after her 2 a.m. breakthrough. She carried it now as a reminder of where she'd started and how far she'd come. Please join me in welcoming Rebecca Morgan, Chief Algorithm Architect at Axiom Technologies, and the recipient of this year's Innovative Mathematics Award. The applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Rebecca slipped the stone into her pocket and walked onto the stage, the spotlight finding her as she approached the podium. As the applause continued, she caught sight of familiar faces in the audience. Michael in the 3rd row, Emily beside him, and beyond them, scattered throughout the hall, former classmates, professors, and now new colleagues from Axiom. "Thank you, Dean Bennett," she began once the audience quieted, "and thank you all for being here today. I've titled my talk, The Value of Useless Mathematics, which might seem provocative, but bears explanation." A ripple of laughter moved through the audience, many aware of the history behind her word choice. 3 years ago, I became fascinated by a mathematical challenge: how to optimize data flow in networks that were constantly changing. My approach was unconventional, treating networks not as static infrastructures, but as dynamic mathematical spaces with emergent properties. The work was considered elegant but impractical. One reviewer memorably called it a solution in search of a problem. Rebecca paused, her gaze finding Bennett, who acknowledged the reference with a small nod. "What I'd like to share today isn't just the technical framework that eventually proved valuable, but the more important lesson about how we evaluate mathematical innovation. Because the math didn't change, what changed was the context in which it was applied." So for the next 45 minutes, Rebecca guided the audience through her journey, balancing technical explanations with the human story of persistence, rejection, and eventual vindication. She explained the core mathematical principles that made her algorithms revolutionary, illustrated with real-world examples from Axiom's implementation. "Dino, the breakthrough wasn't just technical," she explained, displaying a slide showing network efficiency improvements. "It was conceptual, a shift from seeing networks as things we react to seeing them as patterns we can anticipate. The mathematics had always supported this view, but it took looking at the problem from a different angle to recognize its practical potential." As she concluded, Rebecca addressed the students directly, her voice taking on a personal tone. "To those of you pursuing your own mathematical passions, especially those that don't fit neatly into established categories, persistence matters more than approval. The most valuable contributions often come from approaches that challenge conventional wisdom, If your mathematics seems useless to others, but reveals patterns you believe are important, keep going. The world may not be ready for your insights yet, but that doesn't make them any less significant. The applause that followed her closing remarks was sustained and heartfelt. As Rebecca stepped away from the podium, Dean Bennett approached, extending his hand. "Exceptional presentation, Ms. Morgan," he said, the formality of his words contrasting with the genuine respect in his eyes. "You've given our students and faculty much to consider about how we evaluate unconventional research." "Thank you for the invitation, Dean Bennett," Rebecca replied, accepting his handshake. "It means a great deal to have the opportunity to share this journey where it began." The reception that followed was held in the mathematics department's newly renovated atrium. Rebecca found herself surrounded by a constant stream of well-wishers. Former professors offering belated congratulations, students seeking advice on their own research, and industry representatives hinting at potential opportunities. Michael eventually rescued her, arriving with a plate of hors d'oeuvres and steering her toward a quieter corner. "Rock star status achieved," he said, offering her the plate. "I counted at least 3 students taking notes on everything you said, including your drink preference." Rebecca laughed, selecting a stuffed mushroom. "Hardly, but it is surreal to be back here as a speaker rather than a struggling graduate student." "Well-deserved surrealism," Michael replied. "By the way, Emily's trapped in conversation with Professor Leventhal about how your story relates to legal paradigm shifts. I think she's enjoying it, but she might need extraction in about 10 minutes. Rebecca nodded, then grew more serious. "It's strange being celebrated here now. Same building, same people, but everything's different." "Not everything," Michael corrected. "Your math was always revolutionary. What's different is that now they can see it too." Before Rebecca could respond, a young woman approached, early 20s with nervous energy and a well-worn notebook clutched to her chest. "Ms. Morgan, I'm Lisa Cheng, second-year graduate student. Your talk was incredibly inspiring." She hesitated, then continued in a rush. "I'm working on a combinatorial approach to traffic flow modeling that my advisor thinks is too abstract, but after hearing your story—" "Let me guess," Rebecca interrupted gently. "You see patterns that suggest practical applications, but you're being encouraged toward more conventional approaches?" Lisa nodded emphatically. "Exactly. Everyone keeps saying, focus on established methodologies first, but I can't ignore what I'm seeing in the equations." Rebecca smiled, recognizing her younger self in Lisa's frustrated passion. "Email me your work. I can't promise anything, but I'd be happy to take a look." The young woman's face lit up. "Really? That would be amazing. Thank you." After Lisa departed, clutching Rebecca's business card like a precious artifact, Michael raised an eyebrow. "The first of many, I suspect. You're going to become a magnet for every unconventional thinker in academia." "Good," Rebecca replied. "Someone should be." As the evening progressed, Rebecca found herself drawn into a conversation with Dr. Sarah Reynolds and Thomas Parker, who had made an unexpected appearance at the symposium. They stood near the windows overlooking the campus, the Axiom executives seemingly at ease in the academic setting. "Your speech resonated beyond mathematics," Parker observed. "It's a business lesson as well. How innovation often comes from unexpected directions and how institutional blindness can miss transformative opportunities." Rebecca nodded. "The academic and corporate worlds aren't as different as they pretend to be. Both can become trapped in established thinking patterns, which is precisely why Axiom needs to institutionalize what you've brought to our company," Reynolds said. "Not just your specific algorithms, but your approach to problem solving." Parker nodded. We're establishing the Morgan Institute for Applied Mathematical Innovation, a research division within Axiom but with significant autonomy. We'd like you to lead it." Rebecca blinked, taken aback by the unexpected offer. "An institute? With what purpose exactly?" "To identify mathematical frameworks with transformative potential," Parker explained. "To bridge pure mathematics and practical application. To find more $50 million solutions that others have overlooked. With a substantial research budget and the freedom to recruit your own team," Reynolds added, "including promising academics who might otherwise be sidelined by conventional thinking." Rebecca's mind immediately went to Lisa Cheng and others like her, brilliant young mathematicians whose unconventional approaches might never find support within traditional structures. "I'd need complete academic freedom," she said, "the ability to pursue mathematical questions without immediate proof of commercial application." Parker smiled. "Precisely what we're offering. Axiom has learned its lesson about the value of useless mathematics. We want to institutionalize that insight before our competitors realize what they're missing." The conversation was interrupted by Emily, who approached with an apologetic smile. "Sorry to interrupt, but we have that dinner reservation in 20 minutes. Rebecca made the introductions, then turned back to Parker and Reynolds. "Let's continue this discussion next week. I'm intrigued, but would need to understand the details." As Rebecca and Emily left the reception, they passed Dean Bennett in conversation with several faculty members. He caught Rebecca's eye and offered a respectful nod, which she returned before continuing toward the exit. "So," Emily said once they were outside in the crisp evening air, "how does it feel to return as the conquering hero?" Rebecca considered this as they walked across Harvard Yard, the familiar pathways now carrying different associations. "Less satisfying than I expected," she admitted, "and more complex. Not the vindication you imagined?" "Oh, the vindication part feels great," Rebecca laughed. "But standing up there, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was grateful for the journey, even the rejection. It forced me to find a different path." They reached the gates of Harvard Yard, where Rebecca paused, looking back at the illuminated buildings where she had spent so many years struggling for recognition. "If Bennett had supported my work initially, I might have stayed entirely in academia, publishing papers that few people read, instead of building something that actually changes how networks function." Emily linked arms with her roommate. "So, in a way, Bennett did you a favor by calling your math useless?" "In a way," Rebecca agreed with a wry smile, though I wouldn't go that far to his face. The restaurant was a small Italian place in Cambridge, a favorite from their graduate student days when it had represented a special splurge. Now, as Rebecca glanced at the prices, she realized with a start that her new salary made the entire menu accessible without a second thought, another subtle shift in her reality. Michael joined them, and conversation flowed easily among the three friends, touching on Emily's law practice, Michael's research, and the day's symposium. It was only after their entrees arrived that Emily cleared her throat deliberately. "So, I mentioned I had news," she said, setting down her fork. "I've been offered a position with Brenner and Whitestone in San Francisco. Environmental law, focused on technology sector compliance." "Emily, that's fantastic," Rebecca exclaimed. "It's exactly what you've been working toward." "It's an amazing opportunity," Emily agreed, "but it means moving across the country in 6 weeks." The implications sank in. After 3 years as roommates, they would be separating. Emily to California, Rebecca remaining in Boston with her new position at Axiom. "We'll have to find you a new roommate," Emily continued. "Or maybe you're ready for your own place now, Ms. Chief Algorithm Architect?" Rebecca smiled, though the thought of their shared apartment without Emily felt strange. "Maybe I am. Actually, there's something I haven't told you two yet. She described Parker's offer of the Morgan Institute, watching their expressions shift from surprise to excitement. "Your own research institute?" Michael shook his head in amazement. "That's incredible, Rebecca. Will you take it?" "I think so," she replied, "but I want to structure it carefully. Make sure it maintains true research freedom while still delivering value to Axiom." "The Rebecca Morgan Foundation for Useless Mathematics that changes the world," Emily suggested, with a grin. They laughed, raising their glasses in an impromptu toast to new beginnings and unexpected paths. Later that night, back in their apartment, Rebecca sat at the kitchen table, the scene of her 2 a.m. breakthrough months earlier. The space looked the same. Coffee maker in the corner, Emily's law book stacked neatly on the shelf, the slightly wobbly chair that they'd never bothered to fix, but everything else had changed. She opened her laptop and began drafting her vision for the Morgan Institute, not just a research division, but a new model for how mathematical innovation could be nurtured and applied. She imagined a space where promising mathematicians could pursue unconventional approaches without fear of academic rejection, where theoretical elegance and practical application weren't opposing forces, but complementary paths. As midnight approached, Rebecca received an email notification that made her pause, a message from Lisa Cheng, the graduate student from the symposium. Attached was a paper titled "Combinatorial Frameworks for Urban Traffic Flow Optimization." The worker advisor had deemed too abstract for practical application. Rebecca opened the document, expecting to skim it briefly before bed. But as she read, her fatigue disappeared. Lisa's approach was unconventional, certainly, but revealed patterns in traffic flow that conventional models missed entirely. It wasn't fully developed, but the core insight was brilliant. A new way of understanding how individual decisions created collective patterns across transportation networks. Without hesitation, Rebecca composed a reply. "Lisa, I've reviewed your paper and find your approach both mathematically elegant and potentially groundbreaking. Would you be interested in discussing how this work might be developed further? I'm establishing a new research institute at Axiom Technologies and looking for precisely this kind of innovative thinking. Let's meet next week to explore possibilities." She hit send, then leaned back in her chair, a sense of completion washing over her. The circle was closing, from rejected innovator to someone who could now provide opportunities for others facing similar barriers. Her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Just realized what today is. 1 year ago exactly was Bennett's keynote, where you confronted him. Full circle moment." Rebecca smiled, remembering that rainy day when she'd stood in the back of the lecture hall, clutching her notebook of useless equations that would eventually transform an industry. 1 year. It felt simultaneously like yesterday and a lifetime ago. She texted back, "Sometimes the most valuable journeys begin with rejection. Turns out useless math was pretty useful after all." Setting down her phone, Rebecca returned to her draft proposal for the Morgan Institute, adding a new section on identifying and supporting early career mathematicians with unconventional approaches. The late hour didn't matter. She was energized by the possibilities unfolding before her. Outside her window, the Cambridge night was quiet, stars visible between scattered clouds. In offices across the city, across the country, across the world, networks were flowing more efficiently because of equations once dismissed as academic curiosities. Autonomous vehicles were communicating without delays. Smart city infrastructures were optimizing resource allocation, and data was moving with unprecedented precision, all because one mathematician had refused to accept that elegant solutions couldn't solve real-world problems. 6 months later, the Morgan Institute for Applied Mathematical Innovation opened its doors in a renovated building midway between Harvard and MIT. Its first research cohort included 7 mathematicians from diverse backgrounds, each pursuing work that had been considered too unconventional for traditional academic support. Among them was Lisa Cheng, whose traffic flow models were already showing promise for urban planning applications. At the opening ceremony, Rebecca stood before a podium, looking out at faces both familiar and new. Her Axiom colleagues, academic, partners, and most importantly, her team of mathematical innovators. Mathematics has always existed in the tension between pure abstraction and practical application, she began. What we're creating here isn't just another research center, but a new model for how we nurture and apply mathematical thinking. One that recognizes that today's useless equation might be tomorrow's world-changing algorithm. In the audience, Dean William Bennett listened attentively, his expression thoughtful. Beside him sat Dr. Sarah Reynolds, who had championed Rebecca's vision within Axiom's corporate structure. Thomas Parker stood at the back, the CEO's presence a testament to the company's commitment to Rebecca's unconventional approach. Our first challenge, Rebecca continued, is to create an environment where mathematical curiosity can flourish without the immediate pressure to justify its practical value. Our second equally important challenge is to develop the insight to recognize when abstract patterns connect to real-world problems, often in ways that aren't immediately obvious. After the ceremony, as guests mingled in the Institute's collaborative workspace, Bennett approached Rebecca with an outstretched hand. "Congratulations, Ms. Morgan," or should I say, Director Morgan now. Rebecca accepted his handshake. "Thank you for coming, Dean Bennett. It means a lot to have Harvard's support for this initiative." Bennett nodded, glancing around at the innovative space with its glass-walled research pods and digital collaboration tools. "You've created something important here, not just for mathematics, but for how we think about innovation more broadly." "That's the intention," Rebecca replied, "to change the conversation about what constitutes valuable research." "A conversation I failed to engage with properly when you were my student," Bennett acknowledged, his usual certainty replaced by candid reflection. "It's a reminder that we educators must sometimes learn from those we presume to teach." As Bennett moved on to speak with other guests, Rebecca found herself momentarily alone, taking in the reality of what she had built, not just the algorithms that had transformed network optimization, but this space dedicated to nurturing mathematical innovation that others might have dismissed. Her phone vibrated with a text from Michael. "Look at you, mathematical revolutionary. Couldn't be prouder." Rebecca smiled, typing back, "Just getting started. The best useless math is yet to come." She slipped her phone back into her pocket, feeling the smooth stone she still carried. A reminder of that night by the Charles River, of breakthrough moments that come when you persist despite rejection, of elegant mathematics that could indeed solve $50 million problems. Rebecca Morgan moved through the room, connecting researchers with industry partners, facilitating the very conversations that might lead to the next breakthrough. The journey had come full circle, from dismissed mathematician to pioneer, from recipient of rejection to creator of opportunity. And it had all started at 2 a.m., when everyone else said her math was useless. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass. These up, just click and check them out.